Okay, so it is noon. So I want to go ahead and get started and stay on time. I want to welcome you. If you look in the chat box, I put a lot of different information in there that may be helpful to you. Um, and I will repost that because sometimes information can't be seen by incoming people if you've entered after the information has been posted. So I'll go ahead and repost that. My name is Carrie Potter. I am an educational support coach here with Family Matters. I do want to say Family Matters is a parent training information center. And I do want to say that Family Matters is not a legal services agency. We cannot provide any legal advice or legal representation. So any information received from Family Matters at any point in time is not intended as legal advice and should not be used as a substitution for legal advice. So any information you hear today should not be taken as legal advice. So I thought it would be helpful to kind of go over what is a parent training and information center. So a parent training information center, there are nearly 100 parent centers, parent training information centers or PTIs, and community parent resource centers, CPRCs, in the U.S. and territories. These centers perform a variety of different direct services for children and youth with disabilities, for families, professionals, and other organizations that support them. So some activities may include working with families. It could be infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities birth through 26 or to 26. We also help parents participate effectively in their child's education and development. And also we partner with professionals and policymakers to improve outcomes for all children with disabilities. So there are a lot of different things. That's kind of a general overview, but there's a lot of different things that we offer, resources and services that can be offered through your local parent center. I do want to say that Family Matters Parent Training Information Center is unable to offer CEUs for this training or for training participants. Certificates of attendance can be requested by contacting the trainer via email. I did put my direct email in the chat, so if you do need that, feel free to reach out and request a certificate of attendance and we can get that to you. Again, we covered the legal disclaimer. I do want to clarify that the contents of this PowerPoint were developed under a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. However, those contents do not necessarily represent the policy of the U.S. Department of Education, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government. So I want to welcome you. This webinar is being recorded. So the recording will be available on the Family Matters website following the presentation. So that may be tomorrow, but it will be on there shortly. I would say please you can use the chat box if you'd like to put your name, state your name, your title, your organization, where you're from. We like to kind of know who is participating in trainings, who our audience is. I would ask that you use the Q&A box for questions. We will address all questions at the end of the presentation as time allows. Again, if we don't have time for some reason, you have my direct email. If you want to talk about a more specific in-depth question regarding a student, I would say maybe contact me individually or contact our office at our toll-free number and set up a call with I'm one of two educational support coaches, so you would talk to myself or Abby, but we would be happy to work with you more in depth. At the end of today's presentation, you will receive a brief survey, so please take time to complete that. That's very important. We collect stats from that for our grant. It's very important to our grant, and it also helps us understand how we're doing. We appreciate your honest feedback. If there's something we could do better, we want to hear it. If there's something we're doing that you really like, we want to hear it all. It helps us just fine-tune the services we offer to meet your needs. A copy of the presentation slides and resources will be emailed out following the presentation. Again, that might be tomorrow, but those will get out to you in a timely manner. So here at Family Matters Parent Training Information Center, we offer an advocacy helpline and education advocacy helpline. That's a lot of what I do, what Abby does. You may have talked to one of us or both of us by phone if you've contacted our office. Um, so if you have questions about the special education process, things like that, we can help educate you, help you understand the process. If you need something beyond what we can do, we would refer you on. If a family is calling us for legal services, again, we don't offer any form of legal services, have any legal staff on hand. So, if something is beyond the scope of what we can offer, we make referrals to other agencies. We also have an educational surrogate parent program we hold the grant for through our state. More information on that can be found on our website. If you're interested in that, you could, look on our website or contact our office. We're just wrapping up Compass. It was previously VAP, or the Volunteer Advocacy Program, I believe. We've changed the name to Compass. And that right now, I believe, is a 10-week course that's wrapping up, and each week focuses on a different special education topic, like maybe IEPs, evaluations, behaviors, different things. So that is something that we offer annually right now, so you may look for that in the future. We're getting ready to kick off in July. DAISY, we have been trained on DAISY curriculum on family data leaders, becoming a family data leader. So this would be geared towards families whose children are between the age of birth through 5. And it kind of focuses on understanding data, the importance of it, understanding the different types of data, how you can use it to advocate, to make changes, not only for your own child, but systemically as well. So that's something that we're partnering with other presenters or professionals from the early intervention world to come together and help us present that. So that will be offered in July. I believe registration is open and on our website, on our events calendar. So if that's something that interests you, somebody's interested in that, please let us know. Again, or please check out our website. We do offer special education advocacy trainings, kind of like we're doing today, as far as, webinar, sometimes in person as well. You can check our events calendar on our website or check our Facebook as well. They would be advertised on both. If you check out our website, we do have self-advocacy blogs or video blogs. Those are on our website as well. Those are great for professionals, parents, self-advocates to view. And then we offer a quarterly newsletter and transition blast. The newsletter is kind of a general newsletter that's full of resources, kind of what's happening, things you need to know or may want to know. Transition blast is focused towards transition age students. So students in Illinois go through transition at secondary transition, getting ready to transition from high school to adult life. That planning process starts at 14 and a half in Illinois. So we focus on resources related to secondary transition in that news blast and usually highlight a resource or a self-advocate and what they're doing in their life. And then we also offer a monthly podcast. If you have questions about any of that, please let me know. Again, I said Family Matters employs 2 full-time educational support coaches. That would be myself and Abby Mars. We provide trainings, presentations. We provide individualized assistance to caregivers, parents, families, self-advocates, and professionals. So if you contact our office, you're probably going to speak to Abby or myself if you're looking for more individualized assistance. So we'll jump into today's presentation. Today we are focusing on understanding special education basics in Illinois. So our agenda for today is to really focus on, special education, look at child find, referral and evaluations, eligibility categories, IEPs. We want to talk about least restrictive environment and prior written notice, and some other things as well. So today's goals, we want to review steps in the special education process. We want you to understand the special education process in terms more in depth. We want to explore the Illinois State Board of Education Parent Guide as a key resource. We want you to be able to walk away knowing the difference of like a screening and an evaluation, understand the roles, the different IEP team members, who they are and kind of what their roles are, And we also want to review some important timelines in special education so you walk away with more of an understanding of those timelines. So I think it's important to understand special education and what it means. So special education laws and procedures they can be complicated, they can be difficult to understand. If you're, when I was first a parent, navigating special education with my daughter, um, I thought I'm never going to understand this language. There's all these words that I don't know. You know, it does come with time and practicing it and attending meetings for your child and researching and reading, but it can be difficult to understand at times. Um, Special education means specially designed instruction at no cost to parents to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. So when a child has a disability and they're found eligible for special education services, you know, you look at what specially designed instruction is going to help them. Again, there's no cost to the parents. The student is entitled to a free, appropriate public education that meets the needs of that child with a disability. You look at, you know, there can be a range of services with special education that helps students with disabilities learn. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Special education is going to be tailored to meet the needs of an individual student. So students who qualify for special education services would have an IEP or an individualized education plan. So we talked about on the agenda that the Parents Guide from the State Board of Education is a helpful tool. It was last updated in 2020, so this link will be sent to you after today's presentation, but the Parent Guide from the Illinois State Board of Education is broken down into chapters that kind of help you understand. I mean, you can look at a chapter on IEPs or individualized education programs or plans. You can look at, information on child find, referrals and evaluations. There's all different types of, information within the Parents Guide that can be helpful. And you can access that online. If you want a hard copy, sometimes we do have hard copies that can be mailed out. You could request one from our office. So let's talk about child find. Child find is it is an ongoing process through which all children from birth through age 21, or depending on, your state guidelines, um, are identified. Like a school district is responsible for conducting child find and looking for a child or students who may need special education services or who may be eligible for early intervention. They have to identify, locate, and evaluate those students to determine are they eligible. So again, it's an ongoing process where the public school districts are looking at, um, you know, identifying those students who may need those services. And then screenings and evaluations, as appropriate, are available at no cost to the family. So like we said, we wanted to kind of cover what is the difference between a screening versus an evaluation. So a screening is a process of reviewing all children in a given group with a set of criteria. And that's for the purpose of identifying certain individuals for evaluations who may be in need of special education. So if you're screening students, if you screen all students, not everybody is going to need evaluated for special education, but a screening may help, put up a red flag like this student's really struggling in math, so we might need to move forward with a, special education evaluation to determine if they're eligible. So again, a screening is done to determine which students are in need of an evaluation. An evaluation is going to be done to determine if a child has a disability and requires those special education services. So screening is different from an evaluation. I do believe there is information that kind of breaks this down in the parent guide from the state board. So you can refer to that, look at the chapter on evaluations, and that can be really helpful. Make sure there aren't any questions. So I want to talk about referral and evaluation. So a referral would be a process of asking the school district to evaluate a student to decide if a student qualifies to receive special education services. So a lot of different people can make a referral. It doesn't have to be made, you know, sometimes parents may ask, like, can I make a referral? Does it have to come from a doctor? Does it have to be the teacher who refers my child? If you as a parent has a concern, you can make a referral or a request for an evaluation to determine eligibility for special education services. But a referral can be made by either the school district, so like maybe a school district staff sees that a student has been struggling, the district could, approach that, make the referral for an evaluation. A teacher, school personnel can make that request. Again, a parent or a guardian, a state agency or a community services agency. So, if a doctor may make a recommendation, put something in writing that a parent can share with the school. A doctor may say to a parent, I see these concerns, you've expressed these things to me. Did you know you could make a request for a special education evaluation? Sometimes we see, information from medical providers making that recommendation or request. So the evaluation process, this visual is from the Parents Guide from the State Board of Education. If you look in the chapter on referral and evaluation, if you're making an initial request for an evaluation, this kind of breaks down what the steps are. So once a request is made for an evaluation, we always say it's helpful to put it in writing so you have, date it, whether you email it. An email has a date and time stamp on it. But when you put it in writing, you do have a paper trail. So if you make a request for an evaluation to determine your student's eligibility, let's say the parent's making that request, you put that in writing to the school. The school has, if you look, 14 school days from the time that request is made or received to move to step 2, and that would be to make a decision to proceed. So for step 2, the district would meet with a parent to determine whether they should proceed with the evaluation. If yes, then the district would need to determine what domains that student would be evaluated in and request the parent to sign consent to move forward with the evaluation process. If the district says no, they would have to provide a denial in writing as to why they're not in agreement with moving forward with the evaluation request. So let's say the district says yes, they meet with a parent to discuss what areas or domains that student would be evaluated in. You would come to an agreement of what areas of concern there are, what, information you have, what domains that student needs to be evaluated in. And then that timeline for the process, this evaluation process does not start until the parent signs consent. So once parent signs consent, then the timeline to complete the evaluations happens. And that starts a 60 school day timeline to complete the evaluations. So during a period of up to 60 school days, the district personnel can take steps needed to complete the evaluation and then come back. You would come back and have, it says by the 60th school day, the evaluation team would meet with the parent and to determine if that child's eligible for special education services. If that student is eligible, then the IEP team would then meet with the parent to develop that IEP for the student. And then initial placement, when you're asking for an initial evaluation and the student is initially found eligible for services, parent has to sign consent for placement or for services to begin. So again, this is a good visual just to refer to and look at if you have questions about that initial eligibility or evaluation timeline. So we said if a student is found eligible for services, then they would be found eligible under one of the eligibility categories. So if you look at federal regulations, I think one thing is important to realize is there are federal regulations. Sometimes state regulations can be a little different. So, if you look at federally, there are the 13, I believe, eligibility categories listed on the slide. So you look at a student could be eligible under one or more of these categories. So a student could be eligible under autism spectrum disorder, deaf blindness, deafness, um, emotional disability, hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, um, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, specific learning disability, speech and language, traumatic brain injury, or visual impairment. Federal, I believe, does not include developmental delay, but Illinois does. So we have 14 eligibility categories. So it's always kind of important to look at what resources you're referring to so that you have information specific to Illinois. There's nothing wrong with looking at federal, information or resources, but I just always say that is important if you're looking at a website to know, is this Illinois specific or is this just in general, like more based on federal guidance? Just so you know that you have the correct timelines and information since things can vary. So it's important to know who's on the IEP team once and a child or student is determined eligible for services, then, as an IEP team, you're going to meet to create that IEP, develop it. So a parent is part of the IEP team. Parents or guardians are required participants. They're equal participants who have a voice in that meeting and on that team. The student may attend and participate if the parent decides they should be present. And then a student who has reached 14 and a half in Illinois must be invited to the IEP meeting when transition or secondary transition is discussed. So that's another place where I like to clarify. If you're looking at resources that are citing federal, the transition age for federal, it says that transition starts at 16 years old for secondary transition. But in Illinois, we start earlier. We start that student on the transition process for preparing from high school to transition to adult life at 14 and a half. So the student should be invited at 14 and a half, but they could attend earlier at their own IEP meetings. And so other members, so we've talked about the parent, the student, a general education teacher must be included in the IEP team. A general education teacher has knowledge of curriculum and the provided interventions that may be and that they may be responsible for implementing on the IEP if a child may be participating in the general education setting. Also, you have to have a special education teacher, so there must be a special education teacher on the IEP team who is familiar with the provided interventions and responsible for implementing the IEP. The local educational agency, or LEA, is a person who must know about the general education curriculum and be able to ensure that the IEP is implemented, and this is a person who has authority to commit to services. You also have evaluation personnel. So when evaluation information is going to be discussed at an IEP meeting, there has to be somebody there present who can explain evaluation and or test results. So you might not see a school psychologist at every meeting, but you may see them, when evaluation data has been collected and is going to be discussed. And then there's also the option of having others with knowledge or special expertise about a student at a meeting. So if you look at the parent guide from the state board, I know I refer to that a lot, but it does break down who the team members are and kind of what their role or purpose is. And so if you look at that, the wording says that the parents or the school may bring other people to the IEP meeting, such as community service providers, it could be advocates, lawyers, it could be a friend for support, etc. And then it says that it would be a person who has special expertise regarding the child, and then the determination of whether the person has special knowledge must be made by the party who invited the individual to participate in the meeting. So again, that information and wording can be found in that parent's guide and is helpful. So there are a couple questions. Somebody asked, parent can ask anyone who can attend. So yeah, according to the parent guide, it does say that, you could ask others with knowledge about your child to attend that meeting. And the determination of whether the person has special knowledge must be made by the party who invited them. So if you have somebody that you feel would be helpful in that meeting, you can invite them. And I always say, it's helpful to let the school know ahead of time that you want that person to be on the invite list, things like that. I also have a question for the IEP team. Are these all same people throughout the time at school, or can it change? So I believe like it really depends. You might see the same general education teacher invited to each meeting, but I don't think it always has to be the same general education teacher. When my child was in high school, she had she had an IEP, but also had multiple general education teachers. So sometimes it depended on availability, who could sit in on that IEP meeting. So I think as long as it is a general education teacher who can speak to those things, um, then that's okay. So let's move on and we'll come back to questions soon. So IEP timelines to remember. It might be helpful to remember that both the eligibility and the IEP meeting must occur within that 60 school days following the date of parent or guardian consent for completion of needed assessments. That's highlighted on that visual that we focused on from the Illinois State Board of Education for initial evaluations. Um, Again, those meetings could occur separately. Sometimes they're, together on the same day, but they can occur separately as long as they're done within that time frame. And then it's important to know that parents must receive a 10-day prior written notice of an IEP meeting. As a parent, there are times where maybe a meeting happens and you can't get 10 days prior written notice. There is a form that you could waive, but you don't have to choose to. If you're fine with having the meeting with 5 or 9 days notice, that's possible as long as you're in agreement with that. Okay, so another thing to note is that according to the Illinois, um, I believe this is the school code, sorry. So this code provides that beginning July 1st of 2020, so it's been in effect for a few years now, that no later than 3 school days prior to a meeting to determine a child's eligibility for special education and related services or to review a child's individualized education program, or as soon as possible, um, if an individualized education program meeting is scheduled, that within 3 school days, with the written consent of the child's parent or guardian, the local agency must provide the child's parent or guardian copies of all written material that will be considered by the IEP team at the meeting, so that the parent or guardian may participate in the meeting as a fully informed team member. So again, we said you're an equal member. So this was changed, and it focuses on the right of a parent or guardian to get any information that will be discussed at that meeting in advance, so you can be fully prepared. It gives you time to review information. It's not something you have to ask for. It's something that would be given if you get close to that 3 school days or get to that 3 school days prior to a meeting and you don't have it. You could always reach out and ask for that. More timelines to really think about. The IEP team must meet. The IEP would need to be reviewed at least annually. However, if there are concerns on the school end or you as a parent or guardian, a meeting can be reconvened at any time to discuss changes or revisions or different concerns. And then as far as progress, parents or guardians, families should be informed of their child's progress on IEP goals at least as often as parents of non-disabled peers or children. So if progress reports go home quarterly, like 4 times the school year, to parents of general education students, then you as a parent should be informed as often of your students' progress on IEP goals. Um, so the IEP includes many different components, present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. There are annual goals, measurements of progress, how progress is going to be shared. You look at what special education and related services are going to be provided, if any, as far as related services, how the child's going to access the general education curriculum, the languages or modes of communication. Also look at accommodations, modifications, and supports that are going to be provided to that student. And you look at, which assessments would be administered, any accommodations the student may receive on assessments. any description or a description of any assistive technology, including training that the student and staff may need, special training or support that the student, the parent, or school staff may need in order to ensure that that student is provided that FAPE or free appropriate public education. There's also going to be a discussion of whether a student needs additional help or support when school's not in session. So, extended school year services. We do have archived webinars that focus more in depth on extended school year services, so you can check those out on our website. Um, Again, we talked about beginning at 14 and a half, you start looking at what appropriate secondary transition services need to be included in the IEP, what supports may that student need, and then you look at the placement of the child and where where that IEP will be implemented, what is the placement for that child. So present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, those are going to describe how the student is doing in different areas, like where are they at right now, and how that student is using what they've learned throughout the school day or throughout the day. Where are they at with math skills? What grade level are they at? Are they, if they're in 8th grade and they're still working on addition and subtraction, like you want the present levels to be specific to tell you where they're at so you can write a more measurable goal. Annual goals are going to be statements that identify what knowledge, skills, and or behaviors that student is going to acquire within a school year. So if we write, if we meet as a team and write an IEP April 8th, 2025, you're looking at writing goals for that next calendar year, or that, I guess not calendar year, but you're looking from April 2025 to April 2026. What do we want that student to gain within that time frame, that year's time? And so, it's important to know where the student's starting, what that baseline is for their present level, so that you can, work as a team to write an appropriate goal. So a question, you can type in the Q&A or the chat box if you'd like. Should goals remain the same year after year? Okay. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but no, I mean, goals should not remain the same year after year. I think if you're seeing that goals are remaining the same year after year, then that could be a reason to ask for an IEP meeting to look at, what do we need to change? Is this goal set too high? Do we need to take some steps back? Is it being implemented or worked on as written? Is the IEP being followed as written? It could lead to different questions. I think, like, what changes do we need to make? Could we revisit that goal and, tweak that to be more appropriate and help that student make more progress? So goals, you don't want to see them remaining the same year after year. And progress reports, collecting that data and reporting on progress helps all of the team members look, as you get progress reports, you can see, is that student making progress on that goal? There are benchmarks and short-term objectives written into the IEP. So benchmarks and short-term objectives are the steps toward meeting the annual goal. So you say, student's going to do this in this amount of time in a year's time, but then you can break it into smaller benchmarks or objectives to take like steps toward achieving that goal. A short-term objective is going to be something that can be attained within a reporting or grading period. So you're breaking it into smaller steps. By this point, we hope the student's going to master this step of the goal and be one step closer to reaching and meeting that goal as a whole. Accommodations and modifications differ. As far as what they are, it's important to understand the difference. So an accommodation is going to be something that allows a student to complete the same assignment as other students, but it permits a change in maybe timing, formatting, the setting, scheduling, or response or presentation. So an accommodation is not going to alter what the test or assignment measures. It's just going to kind of, like we said it's going to allow a student to complete the same assignment as other students. So it's not altering that test or assignment and what it measures. Now, a modification is going to adjust the expectations for an assignment or a test. So it permits a change in what a test or assignment measures. So an accommodation could be that a student needs extended time to complete a test, or they need tests read to them, or need to take it in a quiet setting with it read to them, things like that. That's not altering what the test or assignment measures. A modification could be more like, you're eliminating, giving multiple choice rather than, or fill in the blank rather than, um, like essay questions. Maybe a student doesn't do well with open-ended questions, so they get multiple choice, things like that, so that they have choices where other students aren't getting those types of questions on their test. So it is altering it. And I would say that understood.org is a good resource. Sometimes they have different resources or that focus on accommodations and modifications and can show some different types of accommodations and modifications. So I refer people there if they're trying to think of what may help my student. That's a good website to go to and refer to. So again, we've talked about this progress toward goals. As a parent or a guardian, you must be informed of your child's progress on the IEP goals at least as often as parents of non-disabled children. We talked about the IEP. There can be special training or support that a student, parent, or school staff may need to ensure the student is provided a free, appropriate public education. So, if a child's using a communication device, a parent may need training on it, same as school staff, because you probably want that student to work on using that communication device or assistive technology device across the board. You want them to work on it at home, at school, and want parents to be trained on how to use that as well. Or you may see that staff need training on how to implement and use a new communication device. Or sometimes you see a child has a medical condition and maybe staff need trained on how to recognize that. Certain training can be listed in the IEP. The least restrictive environment, if you look at federal regulations, it says to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are non-disabled. So it says to the maximum extent appropriate. If you look again, this is a visual from the Illinois State Board of Education Parent Guide, but it gives like a placement continuum to look at what does least restrictive environment mean. When you're looking at what is a least restrictive environment for a student, you want to start at the top. Like, can the student be educated in the general education setting with no supplementary aids or services? If no, you can bump down to the next tier. Could this student be successful in the general education setting with supplementary aids and services? So maybe, they're going to be, you find that yes, that student can be included in English class, but they do need some supports. They couldn't be in that class without any supports. So you may determine that that's the appropriate placement for them. If no, you keep going down. Their needs be more appropriately met in a resource support classroom less than 40% of the school day. And it keeps going down the continuum to the bottom to home hospital placement. So that's a good visual that kind of helps you look at and think about the different placement options on the continuum and kind of thinking through where that student would be placed. And you may find, like with my own child, I found that, with math, she did better in a resource room. But other classes, least restrictive environment for her for English class was in the general education setting, and she had, supports, accommodations, modifications, things like that. So, it's really just helpful to kind of look at that visual I've always found to be helpful. You want to remember that IEP goals should be written before a decision is made on placement. You want to look at placement last. You really want the whole picture of where the student's at, what goals they need to work on, what supports they need before you really determine placement. Goals should be written to help support that student's needs. and they shouldn't be written to reflect the services available in a specific placement. So again, you want to look at individually where that student's at, what supports they need, and determine what placement would be most appropriate or least restrictive for that student. So we wanted to spend some time looking at kind of an example IEP goal. So this goal, the goal area for this example goal would be reading comprehension. So this student has difficulty in the area of reading comprehension. So if we look at their present level performance, that student, the student, let's call him Jack. Say Jack is currently reading at a 3rd grade level and demonstrates difficulty identifying the main idea and supporting detail in grade level text. So based on this information, we're looking at creating an annual goal. So we're going to say by March of 2026, when given a grade level passage, we made it more specific. It would say exactly what grade level. So this could be a little more measurable, but given a grade level passage and graphic organizer, Jack would identify or will identify the main idea and at least 2 supporting details in 4 out of 5 trials with 80% accuracy. And this would be measured by teacher collected data and work samples. This goal would be tied to Illinois learning standards, and we list this learning standard, and it says that to determine the learning standard is to determine the main idea of a text and explain how to support it by key details and summarize the text. So again, we talked about when you create a goal, you're going to break that down into short-term objectives or benchmarks. So those could be the step 1, you want Jack to say by the end of the 1st quarter, Jack will correctly identify the main idea in a paragraph, length text in 3 out of 5 trials. And for the second, by the end of the 2nd quarter, Jack will identify 2 supporting details for a given main idea in 3 out of 5 trials. For the 3rd, it says by the end of the 3rd quarter, the student will use a graphic organizer to summarize a short text, including the main idea and 2 supporting details in 3 out of 5 opportunities. So it's kind of breaking it down into steps, telling us what we as an IEP team expect Jack to do and by when. And, mastering these steps will help us determine if he's reaching that goal. If he masters these steps, like if by the end of the 1st quarter he's mastered this first one, then we would know what we're doing is working. If he's not mastered that, then you may have to, revisit as a team and see what could we do differently. Could we take a different approach to this goal? Prior written notice is an effective tool. So sometimes maybe a parent will be told a decision by a school district representative over the phone or in a meeting or, things like that, or in a conversation. So if a parent makes a request and their request is denied, the school should offer a prior written notice, a denial in writing. Prior written notice is a powerful tool in special education because it helps ensure that there's transparency, it protects the rights of students and parents, and it really promotes collaboration between families and schools. So again, there are certain times when a school must put in writing its decisions about a child's education and state the reasons for those decisions. This written communication, again, is called prior written notice. So parents have the right to receive prior written notice whenever the school wants to do something or refuses to do something. So it could be something as, school may want to evaluate a child or refuses to evaluate a child. It may be changing a child's disability category, changing the child's educational placement, or change the way in which a child is provided a free appropriate public education. Or it could be that, maybe they're proposing terminating special education and related services in response to a parent's revocation of consent for special education placement. So there are certain reasons when prior written notice, would be provided to a family. So we have a couple of examples of prior written notice. It could be that an IEP team is proposing to increase speech therapy from 30 minutes to 60 minutes per week because of new evaluation data showing that the student's making progress, but is still below expected communication levels. So they might put in writing their proposal or prior written notice stating, that this is what they're wanting to do. Another example, this is kind of a letter. I had to break it down into different slides, but here is a refusal example. So let's say the student's name is Elijah. On April 8th, 2025 is the date of the prior written notice. The action is a refusal to assign a one-on-one paraprofessional. What was refused? The parent requested a full-time one-on-one aide, and the school was declining that request. The school stating the reason for refusal was that current supports and being provided are a shared aid, small group help, and sensory breaks are meeting that student's needs, and a full-time aide is not needed right now. The school district included data, what data they used in their prior written notice denial. They're saying they have classroom observations, IEP progress reports, 6 weeks of support or behavior data, and a recent FBA or functional behavioral assessment or analysis. The district is also putting in their prior written notice that they've considered different options, like a part-time aide was discussed but not recommended. The team wants to support the student's independence. And then other notes made were that the team would monitor progress and adjust supports if needed. Parents could request a meeting at any time, and the district listed a contact for the special ed coordinator and a phone number. So that's, kind of an example of prior written notice and how, that may be provided to a family and a situation where it could be provided. Okay, so that is the end of what I have as far as content for today's training. Again, I did say that Family Matters is one of 2 parent training and information centers in Illinois. Every state has at least one. Family Resource Center is the second parent center in Illinois, and they cover 8 Illinois counties in the Chicago region. Their contact information is on this slide, so if you need that, feel free to jot that down, take a picture of it, what have you. But if you reside in Cook, DuPage, Grundy, Kane, Kendall, Lake, McHenry, or Will County, you would fall under FRCD or Family Resource Center and Disabilities catchment area. That's not to say that you can't participate in our trainings and things like that, but for individual assistance, you would contact FRCD since they have access to, resources in your area, things like that, and they would be, able to assist you. As far as Family Matters, again, I listed the counties that FRCD covers. If you look at this map on this slide, Family Matters covers all the counties in white. The ones that are blocked out in green are FRCD's coverage area. So if you reside in one of these 94 counties, you are covered by Family Matters. Our contact information, again, is on this slide. You can contact us by phone to schedule a call with an educational support coach. Again, that would be myself or Abby. You could, our fax numbers provided here. We have an email. This info@fmptic.org is accessible through our website, so you can make contact through our website via email. You have my direct email in the chat. That's another way to contact us. Our website, again, we have a wealth of information, upcoming trainings, things like that, all listed on our website. You can also follow us on Facebook. So I'll give you a moment to jot that down or take a photo of that slide in case you need that. And then I do know that we have some questions. So I am going to go ahead and stop the recording at this point.